Hi guys, it's Bunny and welcome to today's video and welcome to another WWE reaction. For today, I will be reacting to Daniel Bryan's documentary history, and this was actually recommended by Kulo1, and he said, for the Daniel Bryan part of story, watch the true story of Daniel Bryan's Yes movement. That's the one that I found for today, and that's the video that I will be reacting to. And then he recommended other ones in order so I can catch up with the story back to back. Thank you so much, Kulo, for that. And he said, can't believe that was nearly 10 years ago. Time literally flies, you guys. I cannot believe that I have been doing YouTube for almost a decade. Although I did have breaks here and there, even one point I took a break for a whole year because I had death in the family and I couldn't find like the motivation to get back to it. But now I'm back and I'm really hustling and working. I have multiple YouTube channels. I have Patreon as well. I stream on twitch.tv/Bunnymon TV. I do a lot and I cannot believe with the hustle, when you're doing things every single day, you kind of forget the time. The time literally flies and you look back and you're like, what? Where did the time go? What did I do? Like, honestly. But yeah, moving on, we're gonna go and react to this video. But if you are interested in more videos, more WWE videos that are probably blocked or longer or full matches, I will be uploading those on patreon.com/supportbunny. You can check it out there. Sometimes you do recommend a video for me to watch here on YouTube, but then it gets blocked. But I do shout you out there on Patreon. So you might find a video that you recommended for me to see and you wanted to see my reaction to it, maybe from your favorite wrestlers or favorite moments. You can always go to my Patreon and check out if I reacted to that video. Patreon.com/supportbunny. All right, guys, let's go and watch this video, shall we?
Bryan Danielson, or Daniel Bryan in regards to the following story, is one of the most beloved and revered modern-era professional wrestlers. Fans are left spellbound by his exemplary technical wrestling skills while also identifying with his playful and earnest humanity. Bryan is held in such high esteem by a large portion of the general wrestling audience that those fans would move heaven and earth to see him enjoy the spoils befitting of a top champion. And in 2014, when it appeared that WWE was overlooking the most popular star on their show, wrestling fans the world over made their voices heard. I'm Jack from Cultaholic, and this is the true story of the Yes movement.
The Yes movement. Cultaholic. Catholic wrestler. If you know, you know. And if you do know, give this video a like. Daniel Bryan. I like the music.
From the time Bryan Danielson inverted his name to become Daniel Bryan in WWE, he embarked on a WWE run unlike any before or since. Bryan went from heralded indie icon with an unclear mainstream ceiling to headline fodder upon rumors that he might jump to a national competitor 11 years later. That's quite a career arc for someone that debuted as part of a silly reality-based game show in 2010. It was on the premiere broadcast of NXT that clean-shaven 28-year-old Daniel Bryan faced newly crowned world champion Chris Jericho in what will probably be the best match of the season by a wide margin. Though they'd never worked together before, Jericho knew what Bryan was capable of, and the two put together a rather ambitious TV outing. Reflecting later on his first thoughts of Bryan, Jericho wrote, "I knew he would get over big as he'd done it many times before in Ring of Honor and New Japan. Once you learned how to get over, you could do it anywhere." Jericho wasn't wrong. Despite going 0 for forever on NXT, Bryan endeared himself well to the WWE audience. Both the fans previously aware of his rare greatness, as well as the viewers whose only wrestling intake was WWE. When Bryan was temporarily let go over that Justin Roberts strangling incident, fans were outraged. When Bryan's match with Sheamus was bumped from WrestleMania 27's main card, they expressed annoyance. When he became World Heavyweight Champion via Money in the Bank cash-in, there was a widespread feeling of ecstasy. And when a heel-turned Bryan lost the belt in 18 seconds to Sheamus, well, they didn't take too kindly to that. In the year that followed that confounding bit of booking, Bryan made the best of a curious partnership with Kane that centered on each man's anger issues. They did meet in anger management sessions, after all, as they cultivated a grudging love-hate relationship. Their interactions were often very funny and provided some necessary character quirks to the well-rounded technician. And while fans had come to appreciate Bryan's comic sensibilities, many caught on to his quirkiness earlier, as they'd already taken to performing his signature gesture along with him. After winning the World Heavyweight title in late 2011, Bryan was encouraged to be as over-the-top and cheerful as possible and let fan reaction determine the direction of his character from there. To achieve this directive, Bryan co-opted a habit of one of his favorite MMA fighters, then UFC welterweight Diego Sanchez. Sanchez would make his entrance by repeatedly pumping his fist and shouting the word yes to enforce a positive mindset for himself. Bryan took that emphatic yes and added an over-the-top sideways gallop, which he'd perform down the entrance ramp, all the while spiking his index fingers skywards with each affirmative. While it seemed like this taunt was designed to make Bryan into an unlikable douche, fans did catch on to it. There was an infectious energy that would manifest whenever the opening bars of Bryan's Wagnerian rock opera was pumped through the arena, and the taunt complemented that vibe. Soon, crowds were yesing along with Bryan even after he was turned heel. And once a heel, when an increasingly unhinged Bryan tried to get crowds to stop with the yesing, countered with a big no gesture, the yeses continued anyway, and apparently played a part in his character's mental spiral. Despite this attempt to quite inorganically make the yes chants something they weren't, Bryan still had his following, and a vocal contingent continued supporting him through rivalries and issues with Sheamus, CM Punk, AJ Lee, Kane, or whoever stepped up to the plate to face he and Kane when they were teaming up. And while some of Bryan's other peers in group therapy later found the strength to reach for the sky, Bryan was about to launch deeper into the stratosphere. During the summer months of 2013, after Team Hell No had ran its course, Bryan began earning the loudest crowd responses on any given show. Fan faith was rewarded as Bryan stood toe-to-toe with the likes of The Shield, Randy Orton, Christian, Sheamus, and others, oftentimes winning in featured bouts. That July, when WWE Champion John Cena hand-selected Bryan to be his SummerSlam opponent, there was a very real sense that Bryan was being made. The rockstar responses to Bryan had only increased in volume, and it felt like WWE was finally acknowledging that. Yes was now more than just Bryan's personal catchphrase. It had become the affirmative of choice for a fan base that was more used to trolling lukewarm WWE product with a droning, "What?" So 2013 Daniel Bryan really felt like a more positive revelation. Bryan did go on to defeat Cena in an instant classic of a match at the 2013 SummerSlam to win the WWE title. However, his reign was very short-lived, as guest referee Triple H and briefcase-toting Randy Orton ambushed the exhausted Victor, facilitating his immediate title loss. The storyline mirrored what many perceived to be the maddening reality. Normal-sized, modestly human Bryan was internally viewed as far too human.
Honestly, how he described him, modern-sized, and like literally being too humble, more like I feel the audience always finds a way to connect with people that they can relate to, you know, the likes of, I would say, the likes of The Rock or the likes of John Cena or Randy Orton. They're big boys, they're very big athletes, and it's really hard lifestyle to keep up with that. Like, you really need to be a professional at that, and the majority of the audience and us, the fans, like, we are not in that world. So we admire it, we are really respectful of it, we love it, but there is this a bit of detachment when it comes to the humble humanity that we like find and connect with the likes of Bryan, because like it's just a dude. That's how you say, like, of course, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that he's not an athlete or anything like that, but you kind of can relate more to him than the others.
To represent WWE as the face of the outfit, as WWE often preferred to promote giants with million-dollar smiles that were ripped from the pages of the latest graphic novel. Seeing as Bryan looked a bit more like the bass player in a local cover band, he wasn't exactly the company's champion archetype. Instead, he was a B-plus player, a label that Stephanie McMahon placed upon him at the onset of the angle. But fans rallied behind Bryan in what became a man versus the machine story. At 3 consecutive pay-per-views, Bryan and Orton faced off for the WWE title, with screwiness playing a part in all 3 finishes. Bryan won the belt back at Night of Champions, but then had to forfeit it the next night due to referee shenanigans. Neither man then won the vacated title at the horrifically booked Battleground due to a Big Show run-in, or lumber-in. And then finally, Orton won the belt back at Hell in a Cell via more official shenanigans on the part of guest referee Shawn Michaels. And this seemed to finish Bryan's rendezvous with the main event scene, as Big Show was slotted in as Orton's next challenger, with the 7-footer now taking the yes chant for himself. Apparently, weirdly, someone in WWE believed that it wasn't Bryan that was over, but rather the yes chant itself that was over, regardless of who did it. Which is like that episode of The Simpsons when they hold the heroes parade for the inanimate carbon rod instead of Homer for using the rod to seal the capsule door shut, except this wasn't funny this time. With all due respect to Paul White, Bryan was very much the fans' choice of the day, and to have him anywhere outside the main event felt like a slap in the face. The B-plus player angle hit a little bit too close to the nerve for fans who had now grown tired of the machinations of the one and only legitimate mainstream American promotion of the day. And don't say that TNA was a competitor, because at this point, they were scaring AJ Styles away with a substantial pay cut. AJ Styles. Despite the office viewpoint, many fans saw Bryan as more than just a face in the crowd. This was very much apparent in Seattle, 2 hours away from Bryan's stated hometown of Aberdeen, Washington, when a Raw taping in the Emerald City concluded with a symbolic belt raising ahead of Cena and Orton's unification match 6 nights later. The ring was filled with many ex-world champions for this segment, but Bryan outshined them all, earning a deafening response that briefly derailed the intended flow of the segment. And for his part, typically humble Bryan could only laugh a little bit as it was all going down.
Cute.
The following day in San
Jose,
WWE held a press conference to announce 2015's WrestleMania 31 for Levi's Stadium in nearby Santa Clara. Though a great many WWE luminaries were on hand for the presser, Bryan was conspicuously not among them, a fact noted by some of the question askers in attendance. John Cena took the occasion to acknowledge Bryan's absence, as well as acknowledging the uniqueness of the reaction the night before for the popular wrestler. While Cena seemingly had no problem discussing Bryan's popularity, there were apparently some higher-ups in WWE that didn't like being dictated to by the crowd.
But maybe,
just maybe, think this through for a second, maybe the person behind the yes chants were more popular than the chant itself. Big Show's main event run faded quickly, but as that push subsided, Bryan was taking his lumps from the Wyatt family in the upper mid-card. It wasn't the worst idea, seeing as the Wyatts were a hot act when they were first called up. However, it really galled many fans when a battered and beaten Bryan submitted his reluctant loyalty to the group in exchange for them not beating him up anymore. It sadly seemed very apropos to end 2013 with one last debasement of an organic fan favourite. While Bryan did later write that his willingness to join the group was intended to be him plotting to tear it apart from within, fans at the time really groaned at this setup. After all, they'd learned by now not to necessarily trust WWE's storytelling methods. But rather than have this plan to destroy the Wyatts play out slowly over time, Bryan was turned back babyface very quickly. Just 2 weeks after pledging himself to the group, Bryan turned on the Wyatts at the end of the January 13th episode of Raw, attacking the bearded trio after a cage match gone awry. The response from the Providence crowd for the sudden turn was foundation shaking, and their mass yes chanting made for an unforgettable sight. And again, with all respect to the Big Show,
just thinking about them, this makes me emotional. Just thinking about the crowd there turning and then being so loud with the yes chant. I really need to hear this yes chant. Probably is going to be copyrighted on YouTube, but I want to see like a footage of the live yes chant so I can imagine it better.
Who was getting this kind of adulation when he briefly took over the chant. This rushed split of Bryan and the Wyatt family may have been facilitated by something that happened at a college basketball game 1 week earlier. The Michigan State Spartans football team was being honored at halftime of the Spartans basketball game on their home court at the Breslin Center when basketball player Travis Jackson led the crowd in a big collective yesing for their fellow team. The unbelievable scene made it onto ESPN Sports Center, while other media outlets also picked up on the moment, explicitly crediting Daniel Bryan as the inspiration. Now, possibly because of this, kind of becomes pretty hard to justify having Bryan tool around as a lackey in a grey jumpsuit. This was free publicity in the mainstream and a clear indication that Bryan's influence had extended beyond the arena. Not that any of that helped him much in the short term. Though his immense popularity was more than obvious, Bryan went on to lose to Bray Wyatt in a very good opening match at the 2014 Royal Rumble event in Pittsburgh. Oh yes, the Royal Rumble, the event that determines, remember, who challenges for the world title and basically, usually, who main events at WrestleMania. Well, later that night was Orton and Cena's WWE title bout, the latest match in their best of 7,000, and it was fairly by the numbers. In fact, it was so by the numbers that the crowd in Pittsburgh dumped all over it, with one irritated chant after another, including the dreaded, "This is awful." But that response, that was kind of child's play compared to the Rumble match itself. Because there were still several open slots for surprise entrants, many hoped that Bryan, who had not been announced as a participant, would pop up in the Rumble match as well. After all, he was arguably the most popular star in the company at the time, and it would be quite foolish not to have him headline WrestleMania, right? One by one, the entrants hit the ring, some more serious contenders than others, none of which were a bearded man with maroon tights and kick pads over his boots. And then number 30 came around, and when Rey Mysterio hit the ring, all hell broke loose. Daniel Bryan was not in this Royal Rumble, and the crowd in Pittsburgh responded with a sustained torrent of boos that basically pissed all over the remaining field.
Exactly.
The winner of the match ended up being Batista.
Oh my goodness, you guys. Imagine having all these amazing names, all these amazing wrestlers. Like, what can you ask for more? And the crowd is shitting on all of them because they won Bryan. That is for him, it's so honorable. Like, for him to hear that, it must please him a lot. That's amazing.
Who'd only just turned back up 1 week earlier after 3.5 years away. The plan was for Batista to challenge Randy Orton for the WWE title at WrestleMania 30, which the WWE audience wasn't really up for. Fans continued to react with outrage after the fact, flooding social media with their
God, I wonder
disgust.
if WrestleMania doesn't end with Daniel Bryan in the center of the ring with the WWE title chanting, "Yes, we riot." I love the Pittsburgh crowd for having the hashtag Royal Rumble end with boos and Daniel Bryan chants, though.
And it wasn't just the fans. Mick Foley himself blistered WWE's tone deafness in his own written rant. In fairness, it wasn't Batista's fault, nor was it Rey Mysterio's fault for entering the Rumble at number 30. WWE had simply massively misread the room, overlooking the clear and obvious fan favorite.
Exactly.
In fact, Bryan was pretty far down the WrestleMania depth chart based on the original plans. Beneath Batista versus Orton, Taker versus Lesnar, Triple H versus CM Punk, and John Cena versus Bray Wyatt was Bryan facing his old nemesis Sheamus in a match that didn't have any momentum to it at the time. At best, it just seems like a chance for Bryan to right the wrong from 2 years earlier, albeit far removed from the main event. It wasn't exactly an idea to induce excitement. But then, as they often do, plans changed. The day after the Rumble, CM Punk infamously walked out of WWE, owed to the many simmering issues accumulated over time. This upset the balance of WrestleMania.
That was the moment when he walked out, and now he's in AEW. And I did watch and react to his speech. It is on my Patreon, patreon.com/supportbunny. And I reacted, and I heard in the speech that he even said that he has been stepped on, like he is done with that. And I wonder what happened to him. I still don't know his story when it comes to WWE and his storyline, but a lot of people seem to be happy that he returned, even though it is in AEW, and feel like it is the fair choice and the fair thing to do. And I wonder why, because I just want to know what happened there.
As Punk was supposed to go over on Triple H on the Show of Shows. The initial remedy seemed to be slotting Bryan into Punk's place into that match with Triple H to pay off the feud that kicked off at SummerSlam when Triple H was the referee, with the rise of the cumbersome authority. And while the idea of Bryan brutalizing the main face of the WWE office may have satisfied some fans, there was still the issue of the Orton versus Batista main event. Mainly the possibility that the fans would treat it like Goldberg versus Lesnar from 10 years earlier and spend half the match cheering for the referee. Although in fairness, Mike Chioda does deserve to have 70,000 fans chanting his name, doesn't he? We all love a bit of Mike. Fans have booed top babyfaces before, and negative responses to John Cena became an ironic pseudo-sport unto itself. But there was nothing at all playful this time around. This was the fans really believing that they were being messed around, and the tone of their response reflected that. The fans identified with Bryan and wouldn't accept anything less than the man they...
He just mentioned the fan identifies with Bryan while Bryan is literally holding... Was that a goat? A goat, right? Like, I mean, he might be the goat, but we're not. The fans are not the goat.
They believed deserved the spotlight, most getting to enjoy those rewards. The outrage might have fizzled out in other circumstances, but this time, it really persisted. In the weeks ahead, crowds aired their vocal displeasure at live Raws, cheering Bryan loudly while booing Batista and openly disdaining everything else associated with the world title picture. This was the exact opposite of the fandangoing craze from a year earlier, as the company couldn't turn this response into some kind of net positive. Unless, of course, they took a big step and rerouted the booking. As February turned into March, there seemed to be changes in the offing. The supposedly virtuous Batista helped lay Bryan out in one instance, a sign that perhaps Drax the Destroyer was not the ultimate hero in this WrestleMania 30 story. It appeared that the final nail in Batista's babyface coffin was the negative response he got during his match with Alberto Del Rio at Elimination Chamber. Pittsburgh and the Royal Rumble was no fluke, because Minneapolis was firmly on the Big Dave hate train as well, and all the points between the pay-per-view dates seemed to affirm term a similar disinterest in seeing Batista being the one to chase Randy Orton's gold. With WWE realizing that there'd be no way to get a salvageable WrestleMania main event without injecting their most cheered wrestler in the company at the time, they did what they've often had to do in recent years, weave unpleasant reality into the ongoing story. On the March 10th Raw in Memphis, Tennessee, Bryan staged a protest of sorts by having a sea of supporters gate crash the ringside area, filling the squared circle in an act of defiance. Bryan made it clear that the show was being held up until he got his demand, a match at WrestleMania with that saboteur Triple H. Helmsley and Stephanie tried to put an end to the demonstration to no avail. With his anger increasing, a furious Triple H was goaded into not only accepting Bryan's challenge, but also an additional challenge, the right to be added to the WrestleMania World title match should he beat Triple H earlier in the night. From there, even the most pessimistic of fans could possibly see the happy ending on the horizon. WWE's hand was forced, and they were finally caving to popular demand. And after all, this was the first WrestleMania and main roster pay-per-view that would air on the brand new WWE network. The last thing they needed at a moment like this was to do something that would anger their prospective customer base. Well, they sort of did that anyway by having Brock Lesnar end The Undertaker's streak, but at least that didn't go on last. And so, Bryan did win his 2 matches at WrestleMania 30 inside the New Orleans Superdome. First defeating Triple H in a highly scientific opening match before overcoming the odds to beat both Orton and Batista in a wild triple threat main event. Michael Cole declared it the Miracle on Bourbon Street, though a better name would have maybe been the only ending that would actually suffice. Unfortunately, Bryan's reign didn't really pan out afterwards thanks to a significant neck injury. He was forced to abdicate the gold in June and didn't return to the ring until the following January. He came back just in time for another debacle involving a Royal Rumble, a hostile Pennsylvania-based crowd, and an undesirable winner, but that's kind of another story for another time. Still, Bryan's triumph on the Bayou has been cemented as a heartwarming WrestleMania memory. For many fans, its significance rings louder because they know that they had a part in making it happen to some extent. Batista was sadly a victim of bad timing, coming along for a rejuvenated short-term run at the top before sheer volume from the fans kind of slayed the Leviathan.
Like literally he wanted his moment and he didn't get it because something else was more important at that time. And he's the one on top of it, like it's his face there and he's getting all of these chants back. And he probably took it like personal, even though he shouldn't have, because it's not because of him. I feel like the fans went hard because of WWE choices, but this guy got it badly. And I hope he didn't take it personal, and I hope he did understand that it had nothing to do with him. Literally nothing.
We can't feel too sorry for him because he's done quite well for himself since. Since then, similar fan hijackings haven't been as successful. With the exception to the ending of WrestleMania 31 a year later, Roman Reigns' almost unabated babyface push through the latter half of the decade resulted in a prolonged standoff where WWE still pushed their guy while the fans, while booing heavily, kind of just had to accept the way things were. And that's because there was no other main wrestling promotion as a competitor, not until 2019 anyway. The circumstances that led Daniel Bryan to the WWE title at WrestleMania 30 are completely unique. Lightning in a bottle fan support, full-scale audience rejection of creative direction, further rejection of the hand-picked hero, and the exodus of a rabble-rousing anti-authoritarian, CM Punk, all helped configure the realignment of the WrestleMania picture and its storybook ending. And to the fans who got what they wanted on April 6, 2014, if you were to ask them if all the mind-numbing twists and turns leading up to that moment were really worth it, they might just answer you with one specific word.
Yes.
I've been Jack from Cultaholic, and that was the true story of the Yes Movement.
Oh my God, I'm gonna cry. There is nothing better than the chants, man. The entrance of the wrestlers and the chants, like the audience. Humans, when they unite, it's just a force. A huge force. That yes is so cool. I mean, to be honest, like the direction that WWE was going with did not fit. The audience shouted and they heard it, and that's the good thing. It's a good company as long as they are listening to the fans. Probably they messed up actually a lot of times, but the times they did listen to the fans, they got it right. And that's what companies need to do. They need to listen to the people. We know better. Like, even though you are the one who created something, at the end of the day, you are selling it to us. We are the consumers, and if we don't like it, you're going down. So you better make us like it somehow, and you have to listen to us. Companies who listen to the customers and the consumers have reached places. Of course, you need to understand stuff, and you should make big decisions, but a lot of times it's worth it. It is really worth it. But that is it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my reaction. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. I wish you a wonderful day, and see you tomorrow with a brand new reaction. Wonderful day. Bye. Cheers.